my son.
I don't know.
You can make them dance.
So much trouble.
Whatever game you're playing here,
Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.
There are some people who spend their entire lives trying to escape the mistakes they made when they were younger. They change their name, change their surroundings, stay away from the people who knew them before, and convince themselves that the past is finally behind them. But what happens when the past refuses to stay buried? That is exactly where Lucky's story begins. Lucky is not someone who grew up in a normal family. From a young age, she was surrounded by crime, deception, and people who understood how to manipulate others to get what they wanted. Her mother, Priscilla, played a major role in shaping the person Lucky eventually became. Lucky learned early that trust could be dangerous and that sometimes surviving meant knowing how to lie before someone else lied to you. But as Lucky gets older, she realizes that this life is not what she wants. Instead of following the same path forever, she walks away from the criminal world and tries to build something different for herself. For years, she keeps that part of her identity hidden. She wants to believe that she has finally become a different person. The problem is that Lucky has never completely escaped who she used to be. At first, her life seems relatively peaceful. She is trying to move forward while carrying the emotional weight of everything she has left behind. But underneath that quiet life is the knowledge that there are people who would still recognize her, people who remember what she is capable of, and people who have never forgotten the past. Then everything changes. When Lucky becomes involved in a multi-million-dollar heist, what should have been a carefully planned operation quickly turns into a disaster. The plan falls apart, the money becomes a major problem, and Lucky suddenly finds herself caught between people who want the money and people who want her dead. The situation becomes even more dangerous because law enforcement is also closing in, and this is where Lucky has to make a decision. She can either run and hope that everything somehow disappears, or she can use the very skills she spent years trying to forget. The irony is that the life she escaped from may be the only thing capable of saving her now. Lucky knows how criminals think because she was raised around them. She understands manipulation because she learned it before she was old enough to understand what it meant. She knows how to read people, how to create believable stories, and more importantly, how to recognize when someone else is lying. But using those abilities comes with a price. Every time Lucky relies on the person she used to be, she gets closer to becoming that person again. Her situation becomes even more complicated when she realizes that the people chasing her are not necessarily working together. The FBI has its own reasons for tracking her, while the criminal world has its own plans for what should happen to her. Lucky is caught in the middle, and there is almost nowhere she can safely go. One of the most interesting things about Lucky is that she is not presented as a perfect hero. She makes mistakes. She takes risks. Sometimes she chooses the option that seems least dangerous in the moment, only to discover that it has created an even bigger problem that makes her journey feel much more unpredictable. At the same time, the people around Lucky are not simply there to help her. Everyone seems to have something they want. Everyone has secrets, and the more Lucky investigates what is happening, the more she realizes that the heist is connected to much bigger problems from her past. Her relationship with Priscilla becomes especially important because Priscilla represents the life Lucky has been trying to escape. For Lucky, her mother is not simply a family member. She is a reminder of everything Lucky once was and everything she is afraid she could become again. And then there's John, another important figure in Lucky's life who adds another layer of uncertainty to the story. At first, it can be difficult to understand exactly where his loyalties lie. Is he trying to protect Lucky, control her, or use the situation for his own advantage? Lucky cannot afford to trust the wrong person. Meanwhile, investigators continue following the trail left behind by the failed heist. Agent Rand and the other law enforcement figures begin putting pieces together, and every move Lucky makes creates another clue. This turns the story into a dangerous game of cat and mouse. Lucky is trying to stay ahead, while the people chasing her are trying to predict her next move. But there is one thing Lucky has that many of them do not. She knows how to disappear. She knows how to become someone else. And she knows how to make people believe a story that is not true. The problem is that the closer she gets to the money, the closer she gets to the people who want it. As Lucky continues running, she begins realizing that survival is not going to be enough. She cannot spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder. If she wants a real future, she needs to confront the people and decisions that created this situation in the first place. That means going back toward the very world she tried to leave. And this time, Lucky is not running away from it. She is walking straight into it. The more she discovers, the clearer it becomes that the biggest threat may not be the FBI or even the criminals chasing her. The real danger could be the people she once trusted. Because when money this powerful is involved, loyalty has a price, and Lucky is about to find out exactly how expensive that price can be. What makes the situation even worse is that Lucky cannot simply hand over the money and walk away. Too many people are involved, too many secrets have already been exposed, and too many enemies now know that she is still alive. Her past has finally caught up with her. But instead of breaking her, it forces her to become smarter, colder, and more determined. Lucky knows that if she makes one serious mistake, everything is over. So she starts playing the game differently. She stops thinking only about escaping. She starts thinking about winning. And once Lucky makes that change, the entire story begins moving towards something much more dangerous. Because the woman who spent years trying to forget her criminal past is slowly discovering that she may have never truly lost the instincts that made her so good at surviving in the first place. As Lucky gets deeper into the situation, the line between her old life and her new life almost completely disappears. She has spent years convincing herself that she is no longer the woman she used to be. But now every challenge forces her to use another skill. From that forgotten part of her life, she knows how to manipulate a conversation. She knows when someone is hiding something. She knows when an offer sounds too good to be true. And most importantly, she knows that people rarely show their real intentions. That becomes extremely important when Lucky begins searching for Carrie and the missing money. Carrie is not simply another person connected to the story. His disappearance and the money create another mystery that Lucky has to solve while she is already being hunted. Every answer seems to create another question, and Lucky quickly realizes that she cannot rely on anyone else to solve the problem for her. At the same time, Agent Rand continues investigating Lucky's movements. From the outside, Lucky may look like a criminal trying to escape justice, but the reality is much more complicated. She is fighting for her life while also trying to understand how everything went wrong. The pressure keeps building. Lucky is constantly forced to make decisions without knowing who she can trust. Sometimes she has only seconds to decide whether someone is telling the truth. Other times, she has to take a dangerous chance because doing nothing could be even worse. And that is where her character becomes more interesting. She is not fearless. She is scared. She knows exactly what could happen if she gets caught. But fear does not stop her. Instead, it makes her more careful. As the story progresses, Lucky also has to deal with betrayal. Some of the people she thought she understood begin revealing completely different sides of themselves. That is one of the biggest themes running through the story. Nobody is exactly who they appear to be. The people who seem dangerous may not always be the biggest threat, while the people who appear friendly may have their own hidden agenda. Lucky has learned this lesson the hard way. And then the story brings her even closer to her past. The memories of her childhood and her relationship with Priscilla become impossible to ignore. Lucky has spent so much time trying to separate herself from her upbringing, but now she has to accept that her past shaped her in ways she never fully understood. Priscilla knows the old Lucky. She knows what Lucky is capable of, and she knows the weaknesses Lucky tries to hide. Their relationship becomes one of the most emotionally complicated parts of the story because there is love between them. But there is also resentment, fear, and years of unresolved pain. Lucky wants to believe she can build a life completely separate from her mother, but Priscilla represents the reality she cannot escape. Eventually, the danger becomes too big for Lucky to keep running. She realizes that there is no perfect hiding place. There is no magical way to erase what happened, and there is no way to guarantee that the people chasing her will simply give up. So Lucky does what she has always done when things become impossible. She adapts. Instead of reacting to everyone else, she starts creating her own plan that changes the balance of power. For the first time, Lucky is no longer simply the person being hunted. She becomes someone capable of hunting back, but that comes with another danger. The more successful Lucky becomes at manipulating the people around her, the more she risks becoming the person she spent years trying to leave behind. She has to ask herself a difficult question. If surviving requires becoming the person she hates, then what exactly is she saving herself for? That question follows her through the final part of the story. The money is still important. The People chasing her are still dangerous. The FBI is still closing in, but Lucky's real battle has become much more personal. She is fighting for control of her own future, and to get that future, she has to confront the people who have controlled her life for far too long. As everything moves toward the final confrontation, the pressure reaches its highest point. The different sides finally begin colliding, and Lucky finds herself with very little room left to make another mistake. Priscilla also reaches a breaking point. The choices made by the people around Lucky finally have consequences, and the conflict becomes deadly. At the same time, Lucky has to deal with John and figure out exactly how much of what he has told her she can believe. The closer she gets to freedom, the more complicated everything becomes. And then Lucky realizes something important. She does not need everyone to trust her. She only needs them to underestimate her. That becomes her biggest advantage. She takes everything she has learned throughout the story and uses it against the people who thought they understood her. The woman who once ran from her past is now using that same past as a weapon. And when the final confrontation arrives, Lucky is no longer simply fighting to survive the night. She is fighting to decide what happens to the rest of her life. The final moments bring together the different pieces of her journey: the failed heist, the missing money, the FBI investigation, her relationship with Priscilla, and the people who have spent the entire story trying to control her. Lucky finally gets the opportunity to break the cycle. But breaking a cycle is never simple. Sometimes, escaping your past does not mean pretending it never happened. Sometimes, it means accepting what happened, understanding how it changed you, and deciding that it does not get to control you anymore. That is ultimately what Lucky has been fighting for. Not just money. Not just freedom from the FBI. Not even freedom from the criminals chasing her. She wants the freedom to decide who she is. By the end, Lucky has changed. She is still clever. She is still dangerous when she needs to be, and she still carries the scars of the life she came from, but she is no longer allowing other people to define her future. The story closes the chapter on Lucky's journey with the feeling that she has finally taken control of her own life, and that is what makes the ending work. Lucky never becomes an innocent person who suddenly forgets everything she has done. Instead, she becomes someone who understands herself better. Someone who knows exactly what she is capable of, and someone who finally gets to decide what she wants to do with that power. The series premiered on Apple TV on July 15, 2026, with 7 episodes released through August 19th. The cast includes Anya Taylor-Joy as Lucky, Annette Bening as Priscilla, Timothy Olyphant as John, John Whale as Taylor, Drew Starkey, Clifton Collins Jr., and William Fichtner. The series is based on Marissa Stapley's best-selling novel and was developed by Jonathan Tropper and Cassie Pappas. What makes Lucky worth watching is not simply the crime story or the chase. It is the question underneath everything: can someone really escape the person they were raised to become? Lucky spends the entire story trying to answer that question, and by the time everything is over, she finally understands that the past may always be part of her story, but it does not have to write the ending. The biggest mistake Lucky could make now would be believing that surviving the previous situation means she is finally safe. She has escaped dangerous people before, but this time is different. Too many people know her name, too many secrets have been exposed, and the money has created a trail that is almost impossible to erase. Lucky understands that even if she manages to disappear again, someone will eventually come looking for her. So instead of waiting for the next threat to arrive, she starts looking for it herself. That decision takes Lucky into a much more dangerous part of the story. She begins connecting events that initially seemed unrelated. Conversations she once dismissed suddenly become important. Small details from the past start making sense, and she realizes that the heist was never as simple as she originally believed. Someone had planned for things to go wrong. The question is who. Lucky goes back through everything that happened, trying to separate coincidence from manipulation. She knows that criminals often create several backup plans because they never trust the original one to work perfectly. If someone wanted the money badly enough, they would have prepared for the possibility that Lucky might survive. That thought changes the way she looks at everyone around her. Even the people offering help become potential suspects. Lucky starts testing people without letting them know she is testing them. She asks questions that appear harmless, changes small details in her stories, and watches carefully to see how people react. One person gives her an answer that comes too quickly. Another avoids the question completely, and someone else knows information they should not know. For Lucky, that is enough. She realizes that somebody close to the situation has been feeding information to the wrong people. But finding the traitor is only half the problem. She still has to figure out what they are trying to accomplish. Meanwhile, the pressure from law enforcement continues increasing. The investigation is no longer based on a few suspicious details. There is now enough information to connect Lucky to the larger criminal operation, and the authorities are beginning to understand that she is much more complicated than the average person involved in a robbery. Lucky knows this is dangerous. If investigators understand how she thinks, they can predict where she might go next. So she decides to become unpredictable. Instead of following the obvious route, she creates distractions. She makes people believe she is heading in one direction while secretly preparing to move somewhere completely different. It is a risky strategy. But Lucky has always understood one important thing about survival. Sometimes the best way to disappear is to make everyone think they already know where you are. At the same time, her relationship with Priscilla becomes more complicated. Lucky has spent years blaming her mother for the world she grew up in. In her mind, Priscilla was one of the main reasons she had to become so good at protecting herself. But now Lucky is beginning to understand that Priscilla may have been surviving her own dangerous circumstances. That does not erase the mistakes she made. It does not excuse the choices that hurt Lucky, but it does make the past more complicated. For the first time, Lucky begins wondering whether she has been looking at her mother through the eyes of the frightened girl she used to be, and that realization affects her more than she expects. She starts remembering moments from childhood differently. Things that once seemed cruel may have had another explanation. Things she believed were accidents may not have been accidents at all. And there are still questions Priscilla refuses to answer. Lucky knows that those unanswered questions could be connected to what is happening now. So she confronts her. The conversation does not go the way Lucky expects. Instead of giving her a simple explanation, Priscilla warns her that some truths are more dangerous than lies. Lucky does not accept that answer. She wants the truth. She needs it, because if her past is connected to the current situation, then running away will never solve anything. Priscilla finally gives her part of the information she has been hiding, but not everything. There are still pieces missing, and Lucky immediately realizes that her mother is protecting someone. The question is, who? That discovery pushes Lucky toward another dangerous decision. She starts looking into people from her family's past. Names that have not been mentioned in years suddenly become important again. Old connections begin appearing, and Lucky realizes that the criminal world she thought she had escaped was much larger than she understood. The money is only one part of the story. The real prize may be information. And whoever controls that information could control everyone involved. Lucky now has another problem. She does not know who to trust, but she also cannot do everything alone. That is where John becomes increasingly important. Their relationship has always been complicated because Lucky never knows exactly what he wants from her. Sometimes he seems genuinely concerned about her safety. Other times, his actions suggest that he has his own agenda. Lucky decides to confront him directly. She asks him what he knew before everything went wrong. John tries to avoid giving her a straight answer, but Lucky recognizes the signs immediately. He is hiding something. The question is whether he is hiding it to protect her or to protect himself. Lucky refuses to let the conversation end without answers. The tension between them rises, and for a moment it feels like everything could fall apart. But John finally reveals something that changes Lucky's understanding of the situation. He knew more about the operation than he originally admitted. Not everything, but enough. And that is enough for Lucky to feel betrayed. She realizes that while she has been trying to survive, other people have been making decisions about her life without telling her the truth. That makes her angry, but it also makes her more determined. Lucky stops waiting for people to explain themselves. She starts taking control. She creates a plan that depends on everyone believing she is still reacting to their moves. In reality, she is several steps ahead. Her goal is no longer simply to find the money. She wants to expose the person who has been manipulating the entire situation, but doing that means putting herself directly in danger. Lucky knows exactly what could happen if her plan fails. She could lose the money. She could lose her freedom. She could lose someone she cares about. And there is a possibility that she could lose her life. Still, she moves forward because Lucky has finally realized that there is no safe way out. There is only a choice between taking control or allowing someone else to control her. As she puts the final pieces together, another shocking possibility begins to emerge. The person she has been searching for may have been closer than she thought. Someone who has been present throughout the story. Someone who understands Lucky. Someone who knows exactly how she thinks. And if Lucky is right, then the entire situation has been designed around one weakness: her belief that she can trust the people closest to her. Now, she has to decide whether to confront that person immediately or wait until she has enough evidence to make sure there is no escape. Lucky chooses to wait, not because she is afraid, because she knows patience can be more powerful than anger. For the first time, she is not simply reacting to the danger around her. She is preparing for it. And when the opportunity finally comes, Lucky is ready, but she does not realize that someone else has been preparing too, because while Lucky has been studying everyone around her, someone has been studying Lucky. And that person already knows what she is going to do next. Lucky has always believed that the most dangerous person in the room is the one who knows exactly what everyone else is thinking. But now she finds herself in a situation where someone may understand her almost as well as she understands herself. That realization changes everything. She becomes much more careful about where she goes, who she speaks to, and what information she reveals. Even ordinary conversations start feeling like traps. A simple question could be an attempt to discover her location. A friendly message could be bait, and an unexpected meeting could mean that someone has finally figured out her plan. Lucky knows she cannot afford to become paranoid, but she also knows that trusting the wrong person could destroy everything. So she begins working with a new rule: never reveal the entire plan to anyone, not even to the people she cares about. This makes her seem colder, but there is a reason for it. Lucky has already seen what happens when people keep secrets from each other. She has been lied to, manipulated, and pushed into situations she never wanted to be part of. Now she refuses to give anyone that kind of power over her again. Her first move is to create a false trail. She wants the people watching her to believe that she is heading toward one specific location. She leaves behind enough information to make the story believable, knowing that investigators and criminals will eventually follow it. But there is a second plan underneath it. Lucky intends to use the false trail to identify who is actually following her. If someone reacts too quickly, she will know they have access to information they should not have. It is a dangerous experiment, because if she is wrong, she could expose herself for nothing. But Lucky goes ahead anyway. Soon, the reaction she expected begins to happen. Someone takes the bait. And that gives Lucky the confirmation she needed. There is still a leak. Someone is passing information. The discovery gives her confidence, but it also creates a new problem. Now she knows someone is watching her, but she does not yet know how close that person is. Lucky starts looking at her surroundings differently. The people she meets, the cars that appear more than once, the phone calls that come at strange times, the little coincidences that most people would ignore. She notices all of them. And eventually, one detail stands out. Someone has been tracking her movements without directly approaching her. That means this person is patient. They are not trying to scare her. They are waiting. Lucky realizes that this could be much more dangerous than someone simply chasing her. A person who waits is usually confident that time is on their side. So Lucky decides to turn that advantage against them. She changes her routine completely. She stops going to the places people expect her to visit. She changes the way she communicates. She avoids predictable patterns and starts moving through unfamiliar places. For a while, it works. The pressure seems to decrease. But Lucky knows better. Silence does not always mean danger has disappeared. Sometimes it means the other side is getting ready. And then she receives a message that brings the entire situation back into focus. The message is short. It does not contain much information, but Lucky immediately understands what it means. Someone knows about the money. Someone knows what she has been trying to do. And most importantly, someone knows about a secret Lucky thought was buried. That secret involves her past. Suddenly, this is no longer just about the heist. The person behind the message wants Lucky to understand that they know who she really is. Lucky feels the pressure building again. For years, she has worked hard to create a different identity. She wanted to become someone who could live a normal life without constantly worrying about what she had done before. Now one message threatens to destroy all of it. But instead of panicking, Lucky studies the message carefully. She asks herself why someone would reveal that they know her secret. If they truly wanted to destroy her, they could simply expose her. So why warn her? The answer becomes obvious. They want something. And Lucky realizes that this gives her an advantage. If someone needs something from her, then they cannot simply eliminate her. They need her alive. That changes the balance of power. Lucky decides to meet the person behind the message, but she refuses to go without protection. She prepares several escape routes and makes sure that if something goes wrong, she has a way out. The meeting takes place in a location where neither side has complete control. At first, nobody says much. Lucky waits. She wants the other person to speak first. Eventually, they reveal that the money is not the only thing at stake. There is something else hidden inside the entire operation. Something that could expose powerful people. Something that explains why so many people are willing to risk their lives to find Lucky. She realizes that the money was almost a distraction. The real danger is what the money can lead investigators to discover. This makes Lucky understand why the people chasing her have been so desperate. They are not simply trying to recover stolen money. They are trying to prevent a secret from coming out. Lucky now has a choice. She can walk away and try to protect herself, or she can use what she knows to bring the entire operation down. Walking away would be safer, but Lucky has spent her entire life running. She ran from her family. She ran from criminals. She ran from her past. And now she realizes that running has never actually given her freedom. It has only delayed the moment when she has to face everything. So she chooses the harder option. She is going to expose the truth. But doing that means she will have to trust someone, and that is the one thing Lucky has become almost incapable of doing. She thinks about John. She thinks about Priscilla. She thinks about everyone who has lied to her. Then she realizes something. Trust does not have to mean believing someone completely. Sometimes trust means giving someone just enough information to see what they do with it. Lucky decides to test the people around her one final time. She gives different pieces of information to different people. Then she waits. Whichever piece reaches the enemy will tell her exactly who the leak is. It is a risky plan, but it is the only way she can identify the person responsible. The results come faster than expected. One of the pieces of information reaches the wrong person. Lucky now knows the betrayal has been much closer than she imagined, and when she finally confronts the person responsible, she discovers that there is more to the betrayal than money. This person believes Lucky owes them. They believe that because of Lucky's past, she has no right to walk away and start over. Lucky refuses to accept that. She tells them that whatever she did in the past does not give anyone ownership over her future. That moment becomes one of the most important turning points in her story. For the first time, Lucky is not trying to prove that she is innocent. She is simply refusing to let other people decide who she is. But before she can finish what she started, another problem appears. The authorities are getting closer. The criminals are moving. And the people who want the secret buried now know that Lucky has discovered the truth. There is no more time to hide. The game has changed. Everyone is moving toward the same final point. And Lucky knows that when they finally meet, somebody is going to lose everything. By this point, Lucky understands that there is no going back to the quiet life she once wanted. The people hunting her have stopped waiting, the authorities are getting closer, and the secret surrounding the money has become too dangerous to ignore. Every road now seems to lead toward the same confrontation, but Lucky has one advantage. Nobody knows exactly what she is planning. She has spent enough time being watched, followed, and manipulated. Now she turns that experience into something useful. Instead of trying to disappear completely, she allows the people around her to believe that they have finally figured her out. That is exactly what she wants them to believe. Lucky knows that people become careless when they think they have won. So she gives them a reason to become confident. She makes one move that appears almost reckless, allowing information about her whereabouts to reach the people looking for her. From their perspective, it seems like Lucky has finally made a mistake, but there is no mistake. She has chosen the location carefully. She knows who is likely to arrive first, who will follow, and who will stay away. More importantly, she knows that the people coming after her will not all have the same objective. Some want the money, some want the evidence destroyed, others simply want Lucky out of the way. That conflict between them could become her greatest Opportunity. As Lucky prepares for what is coming, she also realizes that she needs to deal with Priscilla. Their relationship has been damaged by years of secrets, but Lucky can no longer ignore the possibility that her mother knows something crucial. She meets with Priscilla again, this time without the anger that usually comes between them. Lucky asks direct questions. What happened in the past? Who was involved? And why was Lucky kept away from certain people? Priscilla does not answer immediately. For a moment, it seems like she might refuse again, but then she finally begins talking. She explains that the world Lucky grew up around was not as simple as Lucky believed. There were people who appeared powerful but were actually being controlled by someone else. There were alliances that changed whenever money was involved. And there were secrets that were protected because exposing them could destroy entire lives. Lucky listens without interrupting. She realizes that her mother has been afraid for a long time, not just afraid of criminals, afraid of what would happen if the truth came out. That changes Lucky's understanding of Priscilla. It does not erase the past, but it helps Lucky see why some of the choices her mother made were so complicated. Priscilla also warns her about the people who are coming. She tells Lucky that they will not negotiate forever. If they believe Lucky has something that can expose them, they will eventually stop trying to recover it peacefully. Lucky already knows what that means. The next move will be violent. Instead of backing down, she begins preparing. She gathers everything she has learned and starts building a plan around the weaknesses of each person involved. She knows who is greedy. She knows who is afraid. She knows who wants revenge. And she knows who believes they are smarter than everyone else. Lucky intends to make them work against each other. Her first target is the person who wants the money most. She creates the impression that someone else has already taken it. That immediately creates suspicion. Questions begin spreading. People start accusing one another, and the alliance that once looked strong begins falling apart. Lucky watches from a distance as the people chasing her start making exactly the mistakes she expected. This is what she is good at. She does not need to overpower everyone. She only needs to understand them. Once people become afraid, they stop thinking clearly. They make emotional decisions. They reveal information. And they sometimes betray the people standing beside them. Lucky uses every one of those weaknesses, but there is one person she cannot manipulate so easily. Agent Rand. Rand has been following the case long enough to recognize patterns in Lucky's behavior. He knows that she is intelligent, and he understands that she is probably not telling the entire truth. Instead of chasing every move she makes, Rand begins thinking about what Lucky ultimately wants. That question leads him closer to the truth. Rand realizes that Lucky is not simply trying to escape with the money. She is trying to expose something, and once he understands that, his approach changes. He begins looking at the case differently. Instead of asking only where the money went, he starts asking why so many people are desperate to keep certain information hidden. The answer leads him toward the same secret Lucky has discovered. Now their paths are moving closer together. Lucky knows that eventually she may have to deal with Rand directly. The problem is that she cannot be sure whether he will believe her. From his perspective, she is still connected to a serious criminal operation. She cannot expect him to simply trust her story. So Lucky prepares evidence. Not enough to reveal everything, just enough to make Rand question the official version of events. She leaves a trail for him to follow. And eventually, he finds it. For the first time, Rand begins to realize that Lucky may have been telling the truth about certain parts of the investigation. But before he can act on that information, the people behind the operation realize that something has changed. They know the investigation is getting too close, and they know Lucky is responsible. The order goes out. Find Lucky before she can expose anything. Lucky receives the warning almost immediately. Now there is no room for another delay. She has to move. The final phase of her plan begins. She arranges one last meeting with the people connected to the money. They believe she is finally ready to give them what they want. But Lucky has no intention of handing over everything. Instead, she brings them into a situation where each person believes they have the upper hand. One thinks Lucky has brought the money. Another believes she has brought evidence. Someone else believes she has betrayed the others. In reality, Lucky has carefully constructed the entire meeting around their expectations. She knows that the moment they start arguing, the truth will begin coming out, and that is exactly what happens. accusations fly, old betrayals are revealed. People begin realizing that they have been lied to. For the first time, the entire operation starts collapsing from within. Lucky stays quiet and watches. She has spent so much of her life trying to survive other people's games. Now, she is watching those games destroy themselves. But then something happens that she did not expect. One person refuses to follow the plan. They pull out a weapon and threaten everyone in the room. Suddenly, all the careful manipulation becomes meaningless. There is no more strategy. No more time to negotiate. Lucky has to react. She moves quickly, using the environment around her to create an opening. The situation becomes chaotic. People run, others fight, and somewhere outside, the authorities are closing in. Lucky manages to escape the immediate danger, but she knows the confrontation has changed everything. The people who wanted to control her have lost control. The evidence is moving, the investigation is expanding, and the secret they worked so hard to protect is finally close to being exposed. Lucky finds herself standing at another crossroads. She could disappear now. She could take what she has and start over somewhere nobody knows her. That was always supposed to be the dream, but she realizes that leaving now would mean allowing the same people to continue hurting others. For once, Lucky does not choose the easiest way out. She turns around. She decides to finish what she started, because maybe freedom is not about running far enough that nobody can find you. Maybe freedom is finally standing still and facing the people you have been running from. And Lucky is ready to do exactly that. Lucky has reached the point where there is no longer a safe option. The people who once controlled the situation have lost their advantage, but that does not mean the danger is over. In fact, it may be more dangerous now because everyone knows the truth is close to coming out. Lucky understands that desperate people are unpredictable. She also knows that if the evidence disappears, everything she has done will have been for nothing. So she makes the decision to protect the information before doing anything else. She separates the evidence into different pieces and makes sure no single person has access to everything. It is not just a precaution, it is insurance. If something happens to her, the truth will still have a way of getting out. For the first time, Lucky feels like she is thinking beyond the next few hours. She is thinking about what happens after all of this is finished. But before she can get there, she has to survive what is coming. The people responsible for the operation begin realizing that Lucky has become too dangerous to ignore. They know she has information that could expose them, and they know the authorities are getting closer. Their only option is to stop her. Lucky receives another warning, but this time she does not run. She knows that running will only make her easier to isolate. Instead, she decides to bring the fight into the open. She contacts Ron. It is a dangerous choice because she still does not know whether he will arrest her the moment he sees her. But Lucky also knows that Rand may be the only person who can turn the evidence into something powerful enough to bring the entire operation down. When they finally meet, the conversation is tense. Rand wants answers. Lucky wants protection. Neither of them completely trusts the other. Rand asks why she kept so much information from him. Lucky explains that every time she trusted someone, another person used that trust against her. She does not expect Rand to understand, but he does. Not completely, but enough. Rand realizes that Lucky is not asking him to believe everything she says. She is asking him to look at the evidence. And when he does, he finds information that changes the case. Names appear. Connections become clear. Money trails begin making sense. People who once seemed unrelated suddenly become part of the same network. Rand understands that the investigation has been much bigger than he originally believed, but there is a problem. The evidence is not enough by itself. They need someone willing to testify. And Lucky knows exactly who that person might be. The problem is getting to them before the people behind the operation do. Lucky and Rand are forced into an uneasy partnership. They are not friends. They are not completely comfortable with each other. But for the first time, they have the same objective. Find the truth, protect the evidence, and stop the people responsible. Lucky's knowledge of the criminal world becomes extremely valuable. She knows where people hide when they are afraid. She understands how criminals communicate without saying things directly. She knows which threats are serious and which ones are simply meant to create fear. Rand has the authority and resources Lucky never had. Together, they become an unlikely combination, But Lucky knows there is still one person she needs to confront. Priscilla. Their relationship has been at the center of Lucky's life for years. And Lucky finally understands that she cannot move forward without knowing the complete truth about her mother. She returns to her. This time, there is no shouting. No accusations. Just to people who have spent years carrying the weight of things they never knew how to say. Lucky asks Priscilla whether she ever regretted the life she gave her. Priscilla admits that she did. She admits that some of her decisions were made because she believed they were necessary for survival, but survival came at a cost. Lucky was forced to grow up too quickly. She learned to distrust people. She learned to expect betrayal. And she learned that love could sometimes come with conditions. Priscilla tells Lucky that she wanted to protect her, but sometimes protection became another form of control. Lucky finally hears the words she has needed for years. Not an excuse, not a perfect explanation, just an honest admission. And that matters more than she expected. For the first time, Lucky stops seeing herself only as the victim of her past. She also stops seeing herself as permanently damaged by it. She understands that the things she learned growing up helped her survive, but she does not have to keep living by those rules forever. That realization gives her a different kind of strength. Meanwhile, the people behind the operation make their final move. They know Lucky and Rand are working together. They know the evidence exists, and they know they are running out of time. So they target the person Lucky is trying to protect. The message is clear. Give us the evidence, or someone else pays the price. Lucky is furious. This is exactly the kind of manipulation she has spent her entire life dealing with. But this time, she refuses to play by their rules. She does not hand over the evidence. Instead, she creates another trap. She allows the criminals to believe that she has agreed to meet them. But this time, Rand and the authorities are prepared. The meeting becomes the final attempt to bring everyone together. Lucky arrives first. She waits. One by one, the people involved begin appearing. Some come because they want the money. Some come because they are afraid. And some come because they think they can still control Lucky. They are wrong. Lucky has already made arrangements. The moment they begin discussing the evidence, the authorities move in. But the criminals are ready for that possibility to. Suddenly, the situation explodes into chaos. People run in different directions. Vehicles speed away. The evidence changes hands. And Lucky finds herself caught between two groups. She has only seconds to decide what to do. She could escape, or she could make sure the evidence reaches Ron. Lucky chooses the evidence. It is one of the biggest decisions she makes throughout the story. For years, she has put survival first. Now she is willing to risk herself for something bigger. She gets the information to Rand, but not without paying a price. Her identity is fully exposed. There is no hiding anymore. Everyone now knows who Lucky really is. The life she tried to build has been permanently changed, but strangely, Lucky does not feel defeated. For the first time, she feels free, because she is no longer carrying a secret that controls every decision she makes. The investigation begins moving quickly after that. The people responsible can no longer hide behind layers of deception. The evidence connects them, the money trail exposes them, and the testimony finally gives authorities enough to move forward. Lucky watches the people who once seemed untouchable begin losing control. It is not the ending she imagined. There is no perfect victory. She cannot erase everything that happened. She cannot undo the choices she made. But she can choose what happens next. And that is something nobody can take away from her. The final stretch of Lucky's story becomes less about escaping and more about rebuilding. She has to figure out who she is without constantly looking over her shoulder. She has to decide whether she can trust people again. And most importantly, she has to learn how to live without the fear that defines so much of her life. Lucky's journey has always been about survival. But by the end, she realizes that surviving and living are not the same thing. Survival is about getting through the next day. Living is about deciding what you want the next day to look like. And for the first time, Lucky gets to make that decision for herself. The strange thing about finally getting what you have been fighting for is that nobody tells you what comes next. Lucky has spent so long focused on surviving that she never really imagined what her life would look like once the immediate danger was gone. For years, every decision was about staying one step ahead of someone else. Every relationship had a question mark hanging over it. Every quiet moment felt temporary. Now, for the first time, the noise begins to fade, but silence brings its own problems. Lucky has to live with everything that happened. She cannot simply wake up one morning and become the person she wanted to be before the heist. Too much has changed, too many secrets have been uncovered, and too many people have been affected by her decisions. Still, there is something different about her now. She no longer feels like she is being dragged through someone else's story. She is finally making choices for herself. The investigation continues in the background, and the people connected to the criminal operation begin facing consequences. Names that once carried fear no longer have the same power. The network starts collapsing as investigators follow the information Lucky helped uncover, but Lucky is not interested in watching every person involved get punished. Her attention is somewhere else. She wants to know whether she can actually build a normal life. That sounds simple. For Lucky, it is almost impossible. She has spent too many years believing that normal life was something other people had. Something she could watch from a distance but never truly have. Now she has to learn how to trust ordinary moments. A quiet morning, a conversation without hidden motives, a phone call that does not make her wonder who is listening. At first, even these things feel uncomfortable. Lucky keeps waiting for something to go wrong. And sometimes she catches herself thinking about the old life, not because she misses it, but because it was familiar. Danger had become normal. Peace is what feels strange. That is one of the biggest changes in Lucky's character. She begins to understand that leaving a dangerous world does not immediately remove the habits that world created inside you. She still studies people's faces. She still notices exits when she enters a room. She still wonders whether someone is following her. But now she recognizes those habits for what they are, survival instincts. They helped her before. They do not necessarily have to control her future. Her relationship with Priscilla also begins to change. There is no magical moment where all their problems disappear. Too much history exists between them. But there is finally honesty. They can talk without pretending everything is fine. Lucky begins asking questions she was too afraid to ask before, and Priscilla answers some of them honestly. There are still things they disagree about. There are still memories that hurt, but they are no longer hiding behind silence. For Lucky, that is progress. She also starts thinking about the people she lost along the way. Some relationships cannot be repaired. Some choices cannot be undone. And some consequences are permanent. Lucky finally accepts that part of growing beyond the past is accepting that you cannot change every result of it. You can only decide what you do next. Meanwhile, Rand continues working on the case. The evidence Lucky provided has opened doors that investigators could not reach before. But Rand knows something else. Lucky was instrumental in bringing the truth out. Without her, many of the people involved might still be hiding. He considers what to do with that information. From a legal perspective, Lucky is still connected to the events. But from a human perspective, her situation is much more complicated. She was involved, she made choices, but she also exposed the people who were using the entire operation for their own benefit. Rand eventually has another conversation with her. This time, it feels very different. There is no chase. No interrogation. No attempt to manipulate each other. They simply talk. Rand tells Lucky that she has a choice. She can continue running from every part of her past, or she can finally stop running. Lucky understands what he means. Running has protected her, but it has also kept her trapped. She cannot spend the rest of her life hiding from a version of herself that no longer exists. So Lucky begins taking responsibility, not only for the things other people did to her, but also for the choices she made herself. That is difficult. It would be easier to blame everyone else. Her mother, the criminals, the people who manipulated her, the circumstances she was born into. But Lucky finally realizes that blaming the past will not create a future. She has to own her decisions. That does not mean accepting that she deserved what happened. It means refusing to let those experiences define every decision she makes from now on. And slowly, something begins to change. Lucky starts making plans that have nothing to do with money, nothing to do with escape. Nothing to do with survival. She starts thinking about what she actually wants. That may be the most difficult question she has ever faced, because when someone spends years surviving, they become very good at knowing what they do not want. They are not always good at knowing what they do want. Lucky begins with small things. She considers where she wants to live, who she wants around her, what kind of work she wants to do, what kind of person she wants to become. There are no dramatic answers, but that is the point. For the first time, her future does not need to be dramatic. It can simply be hers. Still, the story does not completely forget about the danger. Lucky knows that the criminal world she came from does not disappear just because one operation has been exposed. There will always be people looking for money. There will always be people willing to betray others. And there will always be people who believe they can control someone like Lucky. But Lucky is different now. If someone comes looking for her, she will deal with it. She no longer needs to disappear. That realization gives the ending a sense of closure. The old Lucky survived by becoming invisible. The new Lucky survives by refusing to be controlled. That distinction matters. Her journey was never really about becoming a perfect person. It was about becoming her own person. And when Lucky finally looks at everything she has been through, she can see the difference between the girl she once was and the woman she has become. The girl believed that survival meant trusting nobody. The woman understands that trust is a risk, but isolation has a price too. The girl believed her past was a prison. The woman understands that the past can be a scar without becoming a sentence. And that is where Lucky's real transformation happens. Not in the money. Not in the chase. Not even in the final confrontation. It happens when she realizes that she no longer needs permission to become someone different. She can choose. She can make mistakes. She can trust. She can walk away. And if she ever has to fight again, she knows she can. But this time, she will be fighting for something she chose herself. As the story moves toward its closing moments, Lucky gets one final chance to look back at everything that happened. The heist. The lies. The betrayal. The secrets, the people she lost, the people she finally learned to trust. None of it disappears, but it no longer owns her. Lucky finally understands something she could not see at the beginning. Sometimes the hardest part of escaping your past is not getting away from the people who hurt you. It is learning to stop carrying them with you. And Lucky is finally ready to put that weight down. Her story began with a woman running from the life she was born into. It ends with a woman who can finally choose where she wants to go next. Lucky thought getting away from the people chasing her would be the hardest part of her journey. She was wrong. The real challenge begins after the danger starts fading, because now she has to figure out what kind of person she wants to be when nobody is forcing her to survive. For most of her life, Lucky has been reacting to circumstances created by other people. Her family shaped her childhood. Criminals shaped her understanding of trust. The heist forced her into a situation she never expected to face again. Even the authorities played a role in determining what happened next. Now, for the first time, she has control. And that freedom is both exciting and frightening. Lucky has become accustomed to having a reason to keep moving. There was always another threat, another secret, another person she needed to outsmart. Without that pressure, she suddenly has to face the quieter parts of herself. She starts thinking about the choices she made before everything went wrong. Some of those choices were made because she was scared. Some were made because she trusted the wrong people. And some were simply mistakes. Lucky no longer tries to convince herself that every decision was justified. She accepts that she made mistakes. That acceptance is important because it allows her to stop living into extremes. She does not have to believe she was completely innocent. And she does not have to believe she was destined to become a criminal. She can simply accept that she was a person trying to survive circumstances she did not know how to control. That realization changes the way she thinks about her past. For years, Lucky believed that her childhood had already decided her future. Now she understands that it only influenced it. The difference is enormous. She begins rebuilding her relationship with Priscilla slowly. There is no instant forgiveness. Lucky still remembers the things that hurt her. Priscilla still carries guilt over choices she made. But instead of using those memories as weapons against each other, they begin talking about them. Sometimes the conversations are uncomfortable. Sometimes Lucky becomes angry. Sometimes Priscilla has no answer. But they keep talking. That alone is something neither of them was able to do before. Lucky also begins seeing her mother as a person rather than simply the source of everything that went wrong. She understands that Priscilla made terrible decisions. But she also understands that fear can make people behave in ways they never imagined. That does not excuse the damage. It simply gives Lucky a more complete picture. And with that understanding comes another realization. Lucky does not have to repeat her mother's mistakes. She can take the lessons without carrying the behavior. Meanwhile, the investigation continues to close the remaining gaps in the case. The evidence Lucky helped uncover gives authorities a clearer picture of how the operation worked. People who once seemed untouchable begin losing their protection. Some cooperate to save themselves. Others try to deny everything. But the evidence becomes harder and harder to ignore. Rand watches the situation develop while continuing to think about Lucky's role in everything. He knows that she is complicated. She is not a traditional hero. She did things that put other people at risk, but she also took enormous risks to expose a system that had been operating for far longer than anyone realized. Rand understands that people are rarely as simple as a case file makes them appear. Lucky is proof of that. Their relationship remains cautious, but there is a level of respect between them now. Lucky knows Rand could have made her life much harder. Rand knows Lucky could have disappeared without helping anyone. Instead, both of them made difficult choices. That mutual understanding becomes one of the quieter developments in the story. There is no need for them to become close friends. They simply recognize what the other person did. Lucky also starts confronting another issue. The money. For much of the story, the money represented freedom. If she had enough of it, she believed she could disappear. She could change her identity. She could start somewhere new. She could finally stop worrying. But now she realizes that money was never the real answer. Money could buy distance. It could not buy peace. It could not erase memories. It could not make her trust people again. And it certainly could not change what happened. That is why Lucky's relationship with the money begins to change. What once represented escape now represents everything she is trying to leave behind. She no longer wants her future to depend on something that was created through fear, betrayal, and crime. She wants something cleaner, something that belongs to her. That decision is not easy. Walking away from money is difficult for anyone. For Lucky, it means walking away from the one thing she once believed could guarantee her safety. But she does it because she finally understands that safety and freedom are not the same thing. You can have money and still be trapped. You can have protection and still be afraid. You can disappear from everyone and still carry your past everywhere you go. Lucky does not want that anymore. She wants a life where she can stay. That single idea would have been impossible for the old Lucky to imagine. The woman who once planned every escape route is now thinking about putting down roots. That is how much she has changed. Still, the story keeps reminding us that Lucky cannot erase the person she used to be. Her skills are still there. Her instincts are still sharp. She still notices details other people miss. She still understands people quickly. But now she can decide when to use those abilities. She does not have to live in survival mode every second. That distinction becomes especially important when someone from the past unexpectedly appears. The encounter reminds Lucky that her old life is never completely gone. For a moment, the old instincts return. She becomes alert. She considers the exits. She studies the person's body language. Then she stops. Instead of immediately reacting, she chooses to listen. That small decision shows how much she has changed. The old Lucky would have assumed danger and acted first. The new Lucky understands that not every unexpected situation is a threat. Sometimes you can face the past without fighting it. The conversation does not magically solve everything, but it gives Lucky another piece of closure. She realizes that she has spent years imagining that everyone from her past was still waiting to hurt her. Some were not. And she can finally tell the difference. That may be one of the most important lessons Lucky learns. Fear can protect you, but if you let fear make every decision, it can also prevent you from living. Lucky begins allowing herself to experience things without immediately looking for the hidden danger. She starts laughing more. She starts making plans. She starts thinking about people she wants in her life instead of people she needs to avoid. The transformation is subtle, but it is real. The story that began as a crime thriller slowly becomes something more personal. It becomes the story of someone learning that identity is not something other people get to choose for you. Lucky was born into a world she never asked for. She learned skills she never wanted to need. She made mistakes she wishes she could change. But none of those things have to decide what happens next. And as Lucky looks toward the future, she finally understands that she does not need to become someone completely different. She only needs to become someone she can live with. That is a much harder goal, but it is also a much more honest one. Because the past will always be part of Lucky's story. The difference is that now she gets to decide where that story goes from here. For the first time in a long time, Lucky wakes up without immediately thinking about who might be coming after her. It is a small change, but for someone who has spent years living under pressure, small changes can feel enormous. She begins to realize that freedom does not arrive with some dramatic announcement. Sometimes it arrives quietly. It is the first morning when she does not check every window. The first phone call she answers without expecting bad news. The first time she walks into a crowded place without automatically searching for the nearest exit. These moments may seem ordinary to someone else, but for Lucky, they represent something she never believed she could have: a normal life. Still, Lucky knows better than to assume everything is permanently over. The people connected to her old life have been exposed, but that does not mean every connection has disappeared. There are still loose ends, and Lucky has learned that loose ends can become dangerous when someone is desperate enough. That is why she continues paying attention, not because she wants to live in fear again, but because she refuses to become careless. The difference is that she is no longer controlled by that fear. She decides when to listen to her instincts and when to ignore them. That gives her a new sense of confidence. Lucky also starts thinking seriously about her future. For years, she measured time in terms of survival. How long until she had to move? How long until someone found her? How long until she needed a new plan? Now she is thinking in completely different terms. Where does she want to be next year? What kind of relationships does she want? What kind of person does she want people to see when they meet her? These questions are much harder than they sound. Lucky has spent so much time protecting herself that she never had the chance to build a clear identity outside of survival. She knows what she does not want. She does not want to lie constantly. She does not want to depend on criminals. She does not want to live with someone else's threat hanging over her head. But what does she actually want? That answer takes time. She starts exploring possibilities slowly. Nothing dramatic. Nothing connected to crime. Just ordinary things that give her a reason to look forward to tomorrow. For someone like Lucky, that is a major victory. At the same time, her relationship with Priscilla continues changing. They are not suddenly the perfect mother and daughter. There are still disagreements. There are still painful memories. But there is less pretending. Lucky can finally tell her mother when something hurt her without feeling like she has to protect herself. Priscilla can admit when she was wrong without turning the conversation into an argument. It is not a perfect relationship. It is simply an honest one. And sometimes honesty is the beginning of healing. Lucky also thinks about the people she could have become if her childhood had been different. That thought used to make her angry. Now it makes her curious. She cannot know what her life would have looked like under different circumstances. But she no longer spends every day mourning the person she might have been. She focuses on the person she can still become. That shift is important because regret can become another kind of prison. Lucky has already spent enough time trapped by the past. She refuses to build another prison inside her own mind. Meanwhile, the case continues moving through the legal system. The information that came from Lucky helps investigators understand the larger operation. People begin facing consequences. The names that once seemed untouchable are now attached to evidence. Some of them try to protect themselves by blaming others. Some pretend they knew nothing. Others cooperate in exchange for reduced consequences. But the structure that once seemed impossible to break is finally collapsing. Lucky watches from a distance. She does not celebrate. She simply feels relieved. Not because everyone has been punished, but because the threat is finally becoming smaller. For the first time, Lucky can imagine a future where she does not have to look over her shoulder. There is still one question that bothers her. What happens to her now? The law does not simply forget the past. Lucky knows that. She knows she made choices that cannot be ignored. But she also knows that she helped uncover information that changed the entire investigation. Her future remains uncertain, and that uncertainty scares her. She has spent so much time planning for predictable danger that an uncertain future feels almost impossible to control. Then she realizes something. Maybe she does not need to control it. Maybe she needs to live it. That is a difficult idea for someone who built her entire personality around planning. Lucky is used to having backup plans. Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, escape route, safe location, false identity. Now she begins experimenting with something completely different. No plan. Just one day at a time. At first, it feels uncomfortable. Then it becomes strangely peaceful. She starts noticing details she used to ignore. The weather, the people around her, the sound of a city at night, a meal she can actually enjoy without rushing, a conversation that does not need to end with an escape. These things are small, but they make her realize how much of her life she missed while trying to survive. That realization is bittersweet. She cannot get those years back, but she can stop wasting the years ahead. Lucky begins thinking about forgiveness, not just forgiving Priscilla, not just forgiving the people who hurt her, forgiving herself. That may be the hardest one. Lucky carries guilt for things she did when she believed there was no other choice. She wonders whether she could have acted differently, whether she could have saved someone, whether she could have walked away sooner. There are questions she will probably never be able to answer. But she finally understands that punishing herself forever will not change what happened. She can acknowledge her mistakes without allowing them to define her. That is the kind of freedom she has been searching for. Not freedom from the law. Not freedom from the criminals. Freedom from the belief that she has to remain the same person forever. As Lucky continues rebuilding her life, she begins becoming more open with the people around her. She does not tell everyone everything. She has learned enough to know that privacy is not the same as dishonesty, but she allows herself to be known. That is new for her. For years, every relationship required a version of herself that was carefully constructed. Now she begins letting people see the real person underneath. Sometimes that makes her uncomfortable. Sometimes she wants to pull away, but she stays. That is another sign of growth. She is learning that staying can be just as brave as running. And then, one evening, Lucky receives a message that immediately brings back the old feeling in her stomach. Someone from the past has contacted her. The message is vague. There is no obvious threat, but Lucky knows the name. She remembers exactly where she heard it before. For a few seconds, the old Lucky returns. Her mind immediately starts calculating. Who sent it? Why now? What do they want? Who else knows? Should she leave? Should she contact Rand? Should she disappear again? Then she stops. She takes a breath, and instead of reacting immediately, she reads the message again. This time, she notices something she missed. It is not a threat. It is a warning. Someone is trying to tell her that another part of the old network may still be operating. Lucky realizes that the story may not be finished after all, but this time, something is different. She is not alone. She has people she can trust. She has choices, and she no longer believes that running is the only way to survive. Lucky puts the phone down and thinks about what she should do next. The old version of her would already be packing a bag. The woman she has become does something else. She makes a phone call, and this time, she does not make it because she is afraid. She makes it because she is ready. She is ready. The phone call changes the atmosphere immediately. Lucky knows that if someone from her past is reaching out now, there has to be a reason. The investigation may have broken apart the criminal network she was running from, but Lucky has learned that taking down one operation does not erase every connection behind it. She keeps the conversation short. She does not reveal where she is. She does not explain what she knows. And most importantly, she does not promise anything. Instead, she listens. The person on the other end gives her just enough information to make one thing clear. Someone connected to the old operation is still looking for something that disappeared during the chaos. Lucky immediately understands what that means. The money may not have been the only thing that went missing. There could be another piece of evidence, something small enough to overlook, but important enough that someone is willing to risk everything to recover it. Lucky starts thinking back through everything that happened, the locations. The people, the moments when things seemed strange. There was one detail she had never completely understood. During the original operation, something changed at the last moment. At the time, Lucky assumed it was simply bad luck. Now she wonders whether someone deliberately changed the plan. If that is true, then the entire sequence of events may have been designed to make certain people believe they were in control. Lucky begins going through her old memories carefully. She remembers conversations that seemed meaningless at the time. A strange question, a delayed phone call, someone arriving earlier than expected, a person who knew information they should not have known. Individually, none of these details prove anything. Together, they begin forming a pattern. Lucky realizes that someone had been preparing for the possibility that the original plan would fail. That means the chaos was not completely accidental. And if someone planned for failure, they may also have planned for Lucky to survive. That thought makes her uneasy. She has spent so much time believing that she escaped by being smarter than everyone else. Now she has to consider the possibility that someone wanted her alive. The question is why. Lucky decides to investigate without telling anyone. She does not want to create panic before she knows whether the warning is real. She starts with the person who sent the message. Their story seems believable, but Lucky knows better than to trust words alone. She asks for one specific piece of information, something only a person genuinely connected to the old operation would know. The answer comes back almost immediately. It is correct. Lucky now knows the warning is real, but she still does not know who is behind it. She contacts Rand again. This time, she gives him enough information to reopen part of the investigation without revealing everything. Rand is initially reluctant. The case has already consumed enormous resources, And he does not want to chase another theory without evidence. Lucky understands that. So she gives him something concrete, a name, a connection, a detail that can be checked. Rand follows it, and what he finds surprises him. The name connects to someone who appeared to be completely unrelated to the original operation, someone who stayed in the background, someone who never attracted much attention. That is exactly why they are dangerous. Lucky has always understood that the person making the most noise is not necessarily the person in control. Sometimes the real power belongs to the person nobody notices. Rand begins quietly investigating the connection. Lucky does the same from her side. They work separately, but their discoveries start pointing in the same direction. There is still someone operating behind the scenes, and that person appears to know that Lucky is investigating. Soon, Lucky notices something unsettling. She starts seeing the same vehicle in different places. At first, she ignores it. Then it appears again. And again. She changes her route. The vehicle changes its route too. Now Lucky knows. Someone is watching her. The difference this time is that Lucky is not frightened in the same way. She is cautious, but she is not helpless. She tells Rand. He advises her not to confront whoever is following her. Lucky agrees. For once, she decides to wait. She wants to know where the person goes when they think she is not paying attention. So Lucky sets up a simple test. She leaves one location through the obvious exit and another through a less visible route. The vehicle follows the obvious route. Lucky smiles. She now knows the person watching her does not have eyes everywhere. They are relying on predictable information. That gives her an advantage. She begins feeding them false information. A fake meeting, a fake destination, a fake reason for moving, and each time, she watches what happens. The person following her takes the bait. Lucky finally identifies the connection, but there is something strange about it. The person following her is not a major criminal. They are a messenger, a middleman, someone being paid to watch her. That means the real person is still hidden. Lucky tracks the chain backward. The messenger received instructions from someone else. That person received instructions from another. Eventually, the trail leads toward a name Lucky recognizes. And this is where the situation becomes personal again. The name belongs to someone connected to Priscilla's past. Lucky immediately contacts her mother. Priscilla is silent when she hears the name. That silence tells Lucky everything. She knows it. Priscilla tries to warn her not to get involved. Lucky asks why. Priscilla says that some people are not interested in money. They are interested in control. And if Lucky has attracted their attention, then they will not simply disappear. Lucky asks what they want. Priscilla finally gives her an answer. They want something that Priscilla took years ago, something she believed was lost, something that could expose the people who controlled the criminal network from the beginning. Lucky realizes that the missing piece may have been with her family all along. Suddenly, memories from her childhood become important again. She remembers a locked box, a hidden room, a conversation she overheard when she was younger. At the time, she did not understand any of it. Now she does. Priscilla may have hidden evidence years before Lucky even understood what crime really was. And if that evidence still exists, it could explain everything. Lucky asks where it is. Priscilla refuses to tell her over the phone. She says they need to meet. Lucky agrees, but before they can meet, something happens. Priscilla disappears. Her phone is switched off. Her home is empty. And Lucky immediately knows this is not a coincidence. Someone got to her first. The old fear returns. For a moment, Lucky feels like she is back where she started. Someone she cares about is in danger, and the person responsible may be someone she has been trying to avoid for years. But this time, Lucky does not run blindly into the danger. She stops and thinks. If Priscilla has been taken, then whoever took her probably expects Lucky to react emotionally. They expect her to come looking. They expect her to make a mistake. Lucky refuses to give them that satisfaction. Instead, she calls Rand. She tells him everything. The name, the warning, the missing evidence. And now, Priscilla's disappearance. Rand understands that the situation has changed completely. This is no longer just an old criminal case. Someone has actively targeted Lucky's family. They have made their move. And Lucky realizes that the next move will determine whether she finally breaks free from her past or gets pulled back into it forever. She looks at the information in front of her. Then she makes a decision. She is going to find Priscilla, but she is not going to do it alone. And this time, Lucky is not walking into a trap. She is preparing to build one. Lucky knows that finding Priscilla will not be simple. Whoever took her clearly understands how Lucky thinks, which means walking straight toward the obvious lead would be exactly what they expect. So she slows everything down, instead of chasing. The first clue. Lucky begins with the smallest details surrounding Priscilla's disappearance. The house shows no obvious signs of a struggle. Nothing valuable appears to be missing. There is no clear demand, no obvious ransom, and no message telling Lucky what to do. That bothers her more than anything. If someone wanted money, they would ask for it. If someone wanted revenge, they would make sure Lucky knew why. But this feels different. It feels like a message without words. Someone wants Lucky to know that they can reach the people she loves. That is far more personal. Lucky contacts Rand and explains what she has noticed. He agrees that the disappearance looks carefully planned. Whoever took Priscilla did not want attention. They wanted control. Rand begins checking the obvious possibilities while Lucky focuses on the connection Priscilla mentioned. The old name. The person connected to her mother's past. Lucky searches through everything she remembers about that period. She does not have complete information, but she has enough memories to begin asking the right questions. There was a man who used to visit their home. She remembers that he rarely spoke directly to her. At the time, Lucky assumed he was simply another friend of her mother's. Now she realizes he was probably something more. A contact. Someone who moved between different groups and carried information from one person to another. If he is still involved, he may know where Priscilla was taken. Lucky starts tracing his old connections. Most of them lead nowhere. Some people are dead. Others disappeared years ago. A few refuse to speak. But one former associate finally gives Lucky something useful. He remembers that Priscilla once hid something important. He does not know exactly what it was, but he remembers the location. An old property outside the city. Lucky immediately understands why that place matters. Priscilla never talked about it. That means it may have been one of the few places she believed nobody would think to search. Lucky wants to go immediately. Rand tells her to wait. He believes the location could be a trap. Lucky agrees, but she also knows that every minute matters. So they prepare carefully. Rand arranges surveillance. Lucky studies the property from a distance. Nothing looks unusual. The building is old. The surrounding area is quiet. There are no obvious guards. No suspicious vehicles. No visible signs that anyone has been there recently. And that is exactly what makes Lucky nervous. She knows how people hide things. Too much silence can be just as suspicious as too much activity. Eventually, they decide to approach. Lucky goes in first. She moves through the property slowly, remembering everything Priscilla ever taught her about hidden spaces. She checks places most people would never think to look. Behind walls, under floorboards, inside old furniture. Then she finds something. A small compartment. Inside it is a key. Not money. Not a weapon. A key. Lucky immediately knows it is important because Priscilla would never hide something like this without a reason. She takes it and looks around. There is a second clue nearby. A number. Lucky recognizes it from one of her childhood memories. She suddenly remembers a safe deposit box. She remembers seeing the same number years ago, but she never knew what it meant. Now she does. The key is connected to the box. Lucky realizes that Priscilla may have spent years protecting something that could expose the people behind the entire operation. Before she can investigate further, she hears a sound outside. Someone is there. Lucky immediately moves away from the compartment. She hides. Two people enter the building. They are talking quietly. Lucky recognizes one of the voices. It belongs to the same person whose name Priscilla refused to discuss. The man has found the property. That means someone followed Lucky. She stays completely still. The two men search the room. They are looking for something. Lucky realizes they do not know about the key. That gives her an advantage. She waits until they move deeper into the building. Then she slips outside through another exit. She reaches Rand and tells him what happened. Now they know the people who took Priscilla are also searching for the evidence. The key becomes even more important. But there is another problem. Lucky does not know whether Priscilla was taken because of the evidence or because she knows where it is. Either way, they need to move quickly. They go to the safe deposit facility. Lucky expects it to be heavily monitored. Instead, the process is surprisingly simple. That makes her even more suspicious. She opens the box. Inside is a collection of documents, photographs, and a small recording. Lucky looks through the documents first. Names appear. Dates. Financial records. Payments. Connections between people who are supposed to have nothing to do with each other. The evidence is much bigger than she expected. It does not just connect the criminal operation to a few people. It suggests that the entire network was protected by people with legitimate positions and influence. Lucky realizes why Priscilla was afraid. This information could destroy powerful people. She picks up the recording. For a moment, she hesitates. Then she plays it. Priscilla's voice comes through. Lucky listens carefully. Her mother explains why she hid the evidence. She says she believed that exposing the truth at the wrong time would get Lucky killed. She says that she waited because she hoped the danger would eventually disappear. But it never did. Priscilla also reveals something that Lucky never expected. She says the person behind the operation knew about Lucky long before the heist. They had been watching her. They knew she had changed her life. They knew she had walked away. And they were waiting for the right moment to pull her back in. Lucky suddenly understands that the events of the story were not random. Someone had been preparing for years. And the heist was the opportunity they had been waiting for. Lucky feels a mixture of anger and fear. Her entire life has been connected to a plan she never knew existed. But there is one more thing on the recording. Priscilla gives a location, a place where she believes the person behind everything can be found. Lucky looks at Rand. They both understand what this means. They finally have a direct lead, but before they can leave, Lucky receives another message. This time, there is no warning. There is only one sentence. They know she has the evidence, and they have Priscilla. Lucky closes her eyes for a moment. Then she looks at Rand. There is no hesitation now. She knows exactly where she has to go. Not because she has been forced into another trap, but because this time, she has something the people holding Priscilla desperately want. The evidence. And Lucky is finally ready to use it. Lucky knows that having the evidence gives her an advantage, but it also makes her the most valuable target in the entire situation. The people holding Priscilla are no longer trying to guess what Lucky knows. They know she has the documents, the recording, and the information that could expose them. That means the next move has to be perfect. One mistake could put Priscilla in even greater danger. Lucky studies the location mentioned in the recording. It is an isolated place, far enough from the city to make outside help difficult, but not so remote that someone could disappear there without being noticed. She immediately suspects that the location is being watched. If the people behind this operation are as careful as Lucky believes, they will not simply wait for her to arrive. They will have already considered the possibility that she might bring the authorities. So Lucky makes a decision. She will not tell them exactly what she has. She will make them believe she is bringing everything, but she will keep the most important evidence somewhere they cannot reach. Rand agrees with the idea, although he warns Lucky that the plan is extremely dangerous. Lucky already knows that. What she does not tell him is that she has another reason for going. She needs to see Priscilla herself. After everything that happened between them, Lucky cannot leave her mother in the hands of the people who have been controlling their lives for years. She prepares a copy of the documents and keeps the original evidence hidden. Then, she contacts the person who sent the message. The conversation is short. They tell her where to go. They tell her to come alone. Lucky almost laughs when she hears those words. Come alone. It is the oldest trick in the book, but she agrees. The other side believes they have control because they have Priscilla. Lucky knows they are making one major mistake. They are assuming Lucky is still the same woman who used to react emotionally whenever someone she loved was threatened. She is not. She has learned to think before she moves. Lucky arrives at the location alone, at least from the perspective of anyone watching. The building looks abandoned. There are no obvious signs of activity. She walks inside slowly. The silence feels unnatural. Then she hears a voice. Priscilla. Lucky follows the sound and finally sees her mother. Priscilla is alive, but she looks exhausted. For a moment, Lucky forgets everything else. She wants to run toward her, but she stops herself. There are people watching. She can feel it. The person responsible finally steps into view. It is someone Lucky has heard about before. Someone who has remained in the background, while other people carried out the dangerous work. Now Lucky understands why they were so difficult to find. They never needed to be visible. They controlled people through information, money, and fear. The person tells Lucky that they never wanted things to become this complicated. Lucky does not believe them. She asks why they targeted her. The answer is simple, because Lucky was connected to Priscilla, and because Lucky had something they needed, the evidence. Lucky tells them she brought it. They demand to see everything. She hands over the copy. They begin checking the documents. Lucky watches their reaction carefully. The person looks relieved. That tells Lucky something important. They do not realize it is a copy. For the first time, Lucky knows she has the upper hand, but she cannot show it yet. She needs Priscilla out first. She tells them that if they want the rest, Priscilla has to walk away. The person refuses. They say Lucky does not get to make demands. Lucky remains calm. She reminds them that the evidence is not all in one place. If anything happens to her or Priscilla, the remaining information will automatically reach someone who can use it. The room becomes quiet. The person realizes Lucky has planned for this. They ask who has the evidence. Lucky refuses to answer. That is when the negotiation changes. The person threatens Priscilla. Lucky's expression changes, but she does not react. She knows that showing fear will only give them more power. Priscilla looks at her daughter and understands what Lucky is doing. For once, Priscilla does not try to protect Lucky by telling her to run. She tells Lucky to finish it. Those words hit Lucky harder than she expects. For most of her life, Priscilla tried to keep her away from this world. Now she is telling her to face it. Lucky makes another offer. She says she will give them access to the remaining evidence if they release Priscilla. First. The person agrees, but Lucky knows they are lying. She can see it in their expression. So she changes the plan. She tells them where the evidence can be found, but she deliberately gives them one wrong detail. It is enough to send them away from the real location. The person orders someone to check it. Lucky waits. Minutes pass, then the message comes back. The evidence is not there. The person realizes they have been tricked. Everything changes instantly. The people in the room become aggressive. Lucky moves toward Priscilla. The situation erupts, but Lucky has already planned her escape. She knocks over a nearby table, creating confusion, and pulls Priscilla away. They run through the building. Behind them, footsteps get louder. Lucky knows they cannot outrun everyone. They need another way out. She remembers something she noticed when she entered the building. Second exit. They reach it just as the first shots are heard behind them. Lucky and Priscilla escape into the darkness. For several minutes, neither of them speaks. They simply keep moving. Eventually, they reach a place where they can stop. Priscilla looks at Lucky. She wants to apologize. Lucky tells her that she does not need another apology. What she needs is the truth. Priscilla finally gives it to her. She explains that the person they just escaped from was connected to the criminal network for years. The operation survived because people protected one another, passed information between different groups, and made sure nobody outside the inner circle knew the full picture. Priscilla had discovered part of it. That was why she disappeared. She was trying to protect Lucky, but her decision also meant Lucky grew up without knowing the truth. Lucky realizes that both of them made choices based on fear. Priscilla tried to hide the truth. Lucky tried to escape it. And now both choices have brought them back to the same place. But there is one difference. They are finally facing it together. Lucky contacts Rand. She tells him that Priscilla is safe. Then she gives him the real location of the evidence. This time, there is no hesitation. Rand moves. Immediately. The authorities begin closing in on the people who were still trying to recover the documents. Lucky watches from a distance as the operation begins to collapse. But she knows this is not over yet. The person who controlled everything escaped during the chaos. They still have a reason to come after her, and Lucky knows exactly what they will do. Next, they will not try to scare her. They will try to destroy the evidence, because once the truth becomes public, they lose everything. Lucky looks at Priscilla, then at the evidence. For years, her family survived by keeping secrets. Now those secrets are finally becoming weapons, and Lucky is determined to make sure they cannot be buried again. The moment Lucky realizes the evidence is finally in the hands of the authorities, she expects to feel relieved. Instead, she feels something completely different. She feels exposed. For years, secrets protected her family. Even when those secrets caused pain, they also created a barrier between Lucky and the people who wanted to control her. Now that barrier is disappearing. The truth is coming out, and once the truth is public, there is no way to put it back. Lucky knows the people responsible will understand that they have lost the evidence. They have lost control of Priscilla. And they know Lucky is no longer willing to cooperate. That leaves them with very few options. The safest assumption is that they will run. Lucky expects them to disappear before the authorities can reach them, but the person behind the operation has survived this long because they are good at staying several steps ahead. They are not going to simply run. They are going to create another distraction. Lucky realizes that the best way to protect themselves is to make someone else look guilty. That is exactly what happens. A new piece of information suddenly appears, pointing investigators towards someone who was never part of the real operation. At first, it seems convincing. There are financial records, there are messages, there are connections that appear to prove involvement. But Lucky immediately notices something wrong. The evidence is too perfect. Everything fits together almost too easily. That makes her suspicious. She knows how manipulation works. When someone wants to frame another person, they do not always create fake evidence from nothing. Sometimes they take real information and arrange it in a way that creates a false story. Lucky tells Rand he initially believes the new evidence may be genuine, but after looking at it more closely, he notices the same inconsistencies Lucky found. The person behind the operation is trying to redirect the investigation. That means they still have access to information. They still have someone helping them. The question becomes whether that person is inside law enforcement or somewhere else. Lucky remembers something from the original case. There was always one person who seemed to know what was happening before everyone else. A person who was never officially connected to the operation, but somehow always appeared at the right moment. Lucky mentions the name to Rand. He immediately begins checking the connection. The results are disturbing. The person has access to sensitive information. Not enough to control the entire investigation, but enough to know what investigators are looking for. That means the leak may be closer than anyone realized. Rand becomes cautious. He limits the number of people who know about the next steps. Lucky understands why. The enemy is not just outside anymore. Someone inside could be feeding information to them. That makes every move dangerous. Meanwhile, Priscilla begins struggling with what comes next. She has spent years hiding. Now the truth is coming into the open, and she knows that her own actions will be examined. Lucky tries to reassure her, but Priscilla is worried about something else. She knows that when people are desperate, they do not always care who gets hurt. She tells Lucky to be careful. Lucky says she is. Priscilla looks at her and smiles slightly. She knows that Lucky is telling the truth, but she also knows her daughter. Lucky may be careful, but she will never stop trying to protect the people she loves. That instinct has always been part of her. It is one of the reasons she got into trouble. It is also one of the reasons she survived. The investigation continues. Authorities begin making arrests. Some of the people involved finally admit their roles. Others continue denying everything. The network starts collapsing piece by piece, but the person at the center remains missing. Lucky realizes that as long as they remain free, the danger is not completely gone. She begins thinking about where they would hide. Not where a normal criminal would hide, where someone with money, influence, and connections would go. She remembers something from the evidence. A property. A company. A financial account that appeared inactive. At first, it seemed unrelated. Now she sees the connection. The person may have prepared a way out years ago. Lucky gives the information to Rand. He checks it. The account has recently been accessed. Someone is preparing to disappear. That gives them a narrow window. They need to move before the person leaves. Rand organizes a team. Lucky stays out of the official operation. She knows she cannot simply walk into another dangerous situation. But she also knows something the authorities do not. She knows how the person thinks. She knows what they value. And she knows what would make them change their plans. The operation begins. Authorities move toward the property. But when they arrive, the person is gone. At first, it looks like another failure. Then Lucky notices something. The escape was too clean. There are no signs of panic. No rush packing. No abandoned possessions. It looks like they left before anyone knew they were coming. Lucky realizes the person must have known. The leak. Again. Someone warned them. Rand is furious. But Lucky is more focused than angry. She now knows exactly what is happening. The enemy is not simply hiding. They are being protected. And that protection comes from someone with access to the investigation. Lucky starts thinking about the people who have been receiving information. One by one, she eliminates possibilities. Then she remembers something. A conversation. A strange reaction. Someone who asked about a detail they should not have known, Lucky tells Rand. This time, he listens immediately. They quietly investigate the person. The results confirm Lucky's suspicion. There has been an internal leak. The person has been passing information to the criminal network. They are not the mastermind. They are a protector. Someone who has been paid to keep the operation one step ahead. Rand confronts them. The person denies everything. But the evidence is strong. Eventually, they admit that they have been helping the network for years. They also reveal something unexpected. The mastermind is not planning to run. They are coming back, not for the money. Not for the evidence, for Lucky. Because Lucky is the one person who knows enough to destroy everything. This changes the situation completely. Lucky has spent the entire story trying to escape people who wanted to control her. Now the most dangerous person has decided to come directly to her. Rand tells Lucky to leave. To disappear. To let the authorities handle the rest. Lucky considers it. For once, she is tempted. She could leave. She could start over. She could let someone else finish the fight. But then she thinks about Priscilla. About everything her mother sacrificed. About the years Lucky spent running. And she realizes that if she disappears now, the person behind everything will simply find another way to continue. Lucky does not want to run anymore. She wants to end it. So she makes a plan. She will give the mastermind exactly what they want. A chance to find her. But this time, Lucky will decide where the meeting happens. She chooses a place connected to the beginning of her journey. A place where the past and present can finally collide. She tells Rand the plan. He does not like it. But Lucky knows that this may be the only way to bring the mastermind into the open. She prepares everything carefully. The evidence is secured. Priscilla is protected. Rand has a team nearby. And Lucky walks into the meeting alone. The room is quiet. For several seconds, nothing happens. Then a familiar voice speaks from the darkness. Lucky turns around. The person she has been searching for is finally standing in front of her. And instead of looking afraid, Lucky smiles. Because, for the first time, the person who spent years controlling everyone else has walked directly into Lucky's world. And Lucky is ready. Lucky is ready. The person standing in front of Lucky is the one name that has remained hidden behind every layer of the story. For years, this person managed to stay out of sight while other people took the risks, carried the money, delivered the messages, and dealt with the consequences. Now there is nowhere left to hide. Lucky does not move. She simply watches. The person smiles as if they are still in control. They tell Lucky that she has made things much more difficult than necessary. Lucky almost laughs. After everything she has survived, hearing someone talk to her as if she is the problem feels almost ridiculous. She asks why they wanted her here. The answer is simple. They want to know where the original evidence is. Lucky tells them that it is already in the hands of the authorities. For the first time, their expression changes. That was not the answer they wanted. They ask whether Lucky has kept copies. She says nothing. The silence becomes more powerful than any answer. The person begins explaining that Lucky does not understand how serious the situation is. They tell her that powerful people are involved. They tell her that exposing the truth will not simply destroy criminals. It will create chaos. They claim that Lucky has no idea what she is about to unleash. Lucky listens carefully. Then she asks one question. If everything they did was justified, why were they so desperate to hide it? The question hits harder than she expected. For a moment, there is silence. Then the person admits something. They never believed Lucky would get this far. They knew she was intelligent. They knew she was capable. But they believed her fear would eventually force her to run. That was the mistake. They misunderstood what fear had done to Lucky. Fear did not make her weaker. It taught her how to survive. And now she has learned something even more important. She does not have to be afraid anymore. The person tries another tactic. They remind Lucky of her past. They tell her about the people she hurt. The choices she made. The lies she told. They try to make her feel guilty. For a moment, Lucky feels the weight of those memories. But then she realizes what is happening. They are using the same strategy everyone else used. Control her by making her ashamed of who she was. Lucky refuses. She tells them that she knows she made mistakes. She knows she is not innocent. But that does not give them the right to decide her future. The person becomes angry. They expected Lucky to break. Instead, she becomes calmer. That is when the real confrontation begins. The person tells Lucky that she has one final chance. Give them everything. The evidence. The copies. the information. Everything. In exchange, they will leave Priscilla alone. Lucky looks at them. Then she says something they never expected. She does not need to negotiate. Because Priscilla is already safe. The person freezes. Lucky explains that she knew they would try to use her mother as leverage. So she made sure Priscilla was protected before coming here. The entire meeting was never about saving Priscilla. It was about bringing the mastermind into the open. The person realizes the truth. They walked into the trap. Lucky has been recording the conversation, and the authorities are close enough to hear everything. The mastermind reaches for a weapon. Lucky does not move. She knows the authorities are coming, but the person is desperate. They believe they still have one final way out. They grab Lucky and try to use her as a shield. Everything happens at once. The doors open. Authorities rush in. The mastermind tries to escape. Lucky manages to get away. A short struggle follows. And finally, the person who spent years controlling others is taken into custody. For a moment, Lucky simply stands there. She watches. There is no celebration. No dramatic victory speech. Just silence. Because she knows what this moment really means. The person who controlled so much of her life is finally powerless. The investigation moves quickly after that. The evidence becomes public. The network is exposed. More arrests follow. People who once believed they were untouchable are suddenly facing consequences. And Lucky finally understands that the story she spent years trying to escape is actually ending. But there is still one thing she has to deal with: her own future. Lucky knows that even though she helped expose the operation, she cannot simply pretend her own past does not exist. She has to answer for her choices. There are consequences. There are difficult conversations. There are things she cannot undo. But for the first time, she faces those consequences without running. That is the biggest difference between the Lucky at the beginning and the Lucky standing here now. At the beginning, every problem made her look for an escape. Now she is willing to stay. She is willing to face the truth. She is willing to accept whatever comes next. Her relationship with Priscilla also reaches an emotional turning point. The two of them finally have a conversation without secrets between them. Priscilla tells Lucky that she is proud of her. Lucky does not immediately respond. Those words are difficult for her to hear. For years, she believed that everything her mother saw in her was connected to the criminal world. Now she realizes that Priscilla also sees the person Lucky fought to become. They hug. It is not a perfect reconciliation. Too much has happened for everything to suddenly become normal. But it is honest. And sometimes honesty is enough. Lucky also has one final conversation with Rand. He tells her that she changed the entire investigation. Without her, many of the people involved would never have been exposed. Lucky tells him that she did not do it to become a hero. She did it because she was tired of running. Rand smiles. He tells her that sometimes that is what courage looks like. Not being fearless. Just deciding that fear does not get the final word. Lucky walks away from the conversation feeling lighter. For the first time, she is not thinking about where she needs to go next. She is thinking about where she wants to stay. That might sound like a small thing. For Lucky, it is everything. She has spent years treating every place as temporary. Now she starts building something permanent. She does not need a fake identity. She does not need another escape route. She does not need to constantly calculate who might betray her. She can simply exist. The memories will not disappear. The scars will not disappear. But they no longer control her. Lucky finally understands that escaping the past does not mean forgetting it. It means refusing to let it decide your future. And as she looks back at everything that happened, she can finally see the journey clearly. The heist brought her back into the criminal world. The investigation forced her to confront the people who had been controlling her life. The betrayal taught her that trust has to be earned. Her relationship with Priscilla taught her that people can hurt you while still loving you. And the final confrontation taught her that fear only has as much power as you give it. Lucky is no longer the woman who ran away. She is the woman who stayed. The woman who faced the truth. The woman who accepted that her past was part of her story without allowing it to become her entire identity. And just when it seems like everything has finally come to an end, Lucky receives one final piece of information. Something that suggests the story may not be as finished as everyone believes. A name, a connection, a detail that was missing from the evidence. Lucky looks at it carefully. For a moment, the old instincts return. She starts asking questions. Who knew? Who was missing? And why was this information hidden? But then she stops. She smiles. Because this time, she does not have to solve everything alone. She has people she trusts, she has choices, she has a future, and whatever comes next, Lucky will face it on her own terms. The name on the document stays in Lucky's mind long after she puts it down. She has seen enough secrets to know that one missing detail can sometimes be more important than everything already uncovered. The investigation may have exposed the people who were directly involved, but this final piece suggests that someone else may have been operating outside the network. For a moment, Lucky feels the old pressure returning, the urge to investigate, the need to know everything. The instinct to find the person responsible before they can make another move. But this time, she does something different. She does not immediately start running after answers. She takes the information to Rand. That simple decision shows how much she has changed. The old Lucky would have kept the discovery to herself. She would have followed the lead alone, convinced that involving anyone else would make things more dangerous. Now she understands that carrying everything alone is not strength. Sometimes strength is knowing when to let someone stand beside you. Rand studies the information carefully. At first, he does not see anything unusual. Then he notices the same thing Lucky noticed. One name appears in a place where it should not. It is not enough to prove involvement, but it is enough to raise a question. They begin checking the connection. The deeper they look, the stranger it becomes. The person connected to the name does not appear to be part of the criminal operation. There are no obvious financial links. No direct communication. No clear connection to Priscilla. But there is something else. They were present at one of the earliest stages of the operation. Not as a participant. As an observer. Lucky realizes that this person may have known what was coming before anyone else did. That possibility changes the meaning of several events. The original heist may not have been the beginning. It may have been the result of something that started years earlier. Lucky goes back through the memories she has spent so long trying to leave behind. She remembers being young and hearing adults discuss things she did not understand. She remembers seeing unfamiliar faces. She remembers how quickly conversations stopped whenever she entered the room. At the time, she thought adults were simply keeping secrets from children. Now she realizes that some of those conversations may have been about her. That thought is uncomfortable. Lucky wonders how much of her life was actually her own. How many decisions were made around her without her knowing? How many times did someone interfere without her realizing it? She could spend the rest of her life searching for answers. But she refuses to let that happen. She has already spent too many years allowing the past to control her. So she makes a different choice. She investigates just enough to understand the truth, but she refuses to become trapped by it. Rand eventually confirms that the remaining connection is real. The person knew about the network. They knew about Priscilla, and they knew about Lucky, but there is no evidence that they are currently planning anything. That distinction matters. Not every secret is an active threat. Sometimes the past is simply the past. Lucky finally understands that. She does not need to chase every shadow. She does not need to uncover every mystery just because it exists. Some questions can remain unanswered. That is something the old Lucky would never have accepted. She believed that knowing everything was the only way to stay safe. Now she understands that peace sometimes means accepting that you will never know everything. The case officially begins closing. The remaining suspects are processed. The financial investigation continues. The evidence is secured. And the people who spent years believing they could control everyone else finally have to face the consequences of their decisions. Lucky watches from a distance. She does not feel victorious. She feels relieved. There is a difference. Victory suggests that someone won. Relief simply means the fight is finally over. For Lucky, that is enough. Her relationship with Priscilla becomes calmer too. They begin spending time together without discussing crime, money, or the past. At first, the silence between them feels strange. Then it becomes comfortable. They discover that they can talk about ordinary things. Food, movies, travel, small plans. Things that would have seemed impossible during the worst moments of their lives. Priscilla even jokes with Lucky one afternoon. And Lucky laughs. It is such a normal moment that Lucky almost does not recognize it. For years, her relationship with her mother was defined by fear and secrets. Now they are simply mother and daughter. Not perfect. Not completely healed. But together. That is enough. Lucky also begins rebuilding her own life. She chooses a place where she can stay without pretending to be someone else. She starts making plans that stretch beyond the next few days. And slowly, she begins trusting people again. Not everyone. She has learned better than that. But a few people. Enough to know that trust does not always end in betrayal. That lesson may be the hardest one of all. because Lucky's entire personality was built around the belief that people eventually hurt you. Now she has to challenge that belief. Sometimes she succeeds, sometimes she pulls away too quickly, sometimes she catches herself expecting the worst and has to stop. But she keeps trying. That is what makes her transformation feel real. She does not suddenly become fearless. She simply stops allowing fear to make every decision. One evening, Lucky returns to a place connected to the beginning of everything. She stands there quietly, remembering the person she was when this story started. Back then, she believed she had already escaped. She thought changing her life meant leaving certain people behind. Now she understands that escaping physically was only the first step. The real escape happened inside her. She stopped believing that her past had the right to define her. She stopped allowing other people to decide what she deserved. And she stopped confusing survival with living. Lucky looks around one last time. There is no one chasing her. No phone call demanding money. No stranger waiting in the shadows. No immediate danger. Just silence. This time, the silence does not feel threatening. It feels peaceful. She takes out her phone. There are several messages waiting. One is from Priscilla. Another is from Rand. For years, a phone full of messages would have made Lucky nervous. Now she simply reads them. She smiles. Then she puts the phone away. She keeps walking. There is no dramatic escape. No final chase. No need for another disguise. Lucky simply walks toward the life she has chosen. And that is exactly why the ending feels important. Her story was never really about becoming the richest person in the room or defeating every criminal who stood in her way. It was about taking back control. At the beginning, Lucky's past controlled her. Her family controlled her. Fear controlled her. The criminal world controlled her. Even the secrets she carried controlled her. By the end, none of those things has disappeared completely. But they no longer control her. Lucky finally understands that freedom does not mean having a life without problems. It means having the ability to decide how you respond to them. She can still be afraid. She can still make mistakes. She can still have difficult days. But those things no longer define her. And perhaps that is the most human part of her journey. She does not become a completely different person. She becomes a more honest version of herself. The woman who once believed she had to survive alone finally understands that she does not. The daughter who spent years resenting her mother finally finds a way to understand her. The woman who once ran from every part of her past finally turns around and faces it. And after everything, she keeps moving forward. Not because she knows exactly what will happen next, but because, for the first time, she does not need to. Lucky's future is uncertain. And that uncertainty no longer scares her. It feels like freedom. It's like freedom.